Okay, guys, hello and welcome to the Guest Life Podcast, episode 68 with Erika Giuggio. We're going to talk about consulting, how she's kind of moved around in her businesses, and just before we got on camera, we talked about focus. So she's got some broader things. I've got some patience and focus things that we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Again, I always thought just my mom would be the only one listening. So for anyone out there, thank you. It means a lot. And we're excited to hear Erika's story today.
No, Daniel, thank you so much for having us.
It's Saturday morning. We're at 9:30. We both had an hour drive in today. We're in beautiful Ancaster, Ontario. And we're about to get excited.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Okay, Erika. So working with Schooley Mitchell. So right now she's passionate about cost reduction specialist with Schooley Mitchell, which we're going to learn about today. And then really talking about how she recently made a transition to this role and what it looks like for her.
Absolutely. So in the past, I was a marketer. Loved it. I still do it to this day. I think every business needs to be in some sort of capacity of marketing. And what I mean by that is relationship building. But when I was in that space, one thing that I used to get really frustrated and there was like this burning desire or something that just lit me on fire was every time I would jump into, like, I would go to businesses, they would come to me and say, okay, I need marketing. And I'm like, well, why do you think you need marketing? And what are your goals? And most of the time they'd be like, okay, I want to get to 10 million, 100 million, whatever the case may be. And they're like, I need you to do all these ads and, create my website and do this, this, and that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, yes, I can do that. But let's look more into detail about your business. Let's look at you as a leader. Let's look at your staff. You have high turnover. Let's look at some of your expenses. There's a lot of holes in boats. And if you don't clog up the right one, any marketing efforts that you're going to do in 3 months, you're going to say, this is not working. It's not working because I just sent you 10 leads and your receptionist, I called them on Monday and it is now Thursday and they have not returned my call or my emails or anything. So I still love it to this day and I still do some stuff here and there. But I came across Schooley. I wanted to get into the franchising space. Cody Sanchez inspired me. She's like, listen, get into something that's boring. Vending machines, HVAC, plumbing, it doesn't matter if it's a recession, the taps need to turn on, the electricity needs to come on. Or you got to have some heat or air conditioning either way.
For sure.
And I started a business prior and I had a patent. And it was in the cosmetic industry, had no freaking clue where to start, where to go. When I got into franchise, it was like the golden pavement because they give you the processes, they give you the systems. What you need to do is relationship build.
Okay.
And I knew how to do that for marketing. So that's how I jumped into Schooley. And Schooley was like, hey, what we do is we help businesses save on expenses. And I was like, this is perfect because we're in a recession. This was at the time. Now we're moving towards like a little bit here of a depression. 150 businesses and people a day are going bankrupt in Canada. If I can give you an extra 50,000, 200,000, what would that do to your bottom line? And that was like warm and fuzzy inside because now the people that are in the office may be getting $50,000 and they're saying, you know what, I got to put food on my table. I have to jump into another job. Now you can take that money and say, hey, either we're going to put that back into the business, we're going to put that back into our people, or you know what, maybe that's something that I need personally right now. So that's how I got into Schooley. Then when I got into Schooley, I said, you know what, I'm going to help women entrepreneurs because I know what it feels like and it's not easy. There's resources out there, but sometimes some people don't know where to look. Mm-hmm. And then somehow I made my way back into construction. So when I went to school the first time, I was actually in urban planning. And the reason why I jumped out of urban planning was because the construction space is so messy. But what I realized is that even now in construction trades and contractors, you guys focus on your skill. You pour the concrete, you make it all look nice. You start at 4:00 in the morning. When the end of the day comes, what do you want to do? Crack open up a beer and watch TV. And I would want to do the same thing. There's not every business, but there's a lack of the business aspect of it versus the skill. And there's so much potential.
Tons. We see that a lot in our industries, and there's a lot of. I always used to say this, and it was an ego stroke a little bit, and then it caught me, which I was actually the other side of the coin, which was there's a lot of tradespeople that own businesses. There's not a lot of business owners that own trades companies.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh no, I'm the business owner that owns the trades company, and then realizing I'm not was good and humbling, but also something to work towards. You don't know what you don't know, so that's, I'm assuming, what Schooley Mitchell gets you going towards.
Exactly. Absolutely. And you go to trade school, it's the same thing too. Or to be honest, any sort of degree nowadays, there's a business degree, and then sometimes there's everything else. Because you go to trade school and you're focusing on, how do I build this table? What is the physics behind it? What are the materials? You might think, oh, okay, I got to go to this supplier and this supplier. But then when it comes to taxes and everything else, no clue.
So we're going to pause on that because we're going to start on, how'd you get to this point? So what was your first paid job?
Okay, so my first paid job, do you remember in high school when you had to do your 40 hours of community service?
Of course.
Well, I was a nerd and actually finished them. And so grade 9, I got in with the city of Brampton.
Okay.
And I used to teach skating lessons. So I used to be a figure skater back in the day. And you had to have like a little, I can't even remember what it's called. Not Can Skate, but it was like Skate Canada, like this little certification. I did all my volunteer hours. The minute I turned 15, they pulled me aside and they're like, hey, do you want to work here? I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I would go from arena to arena and I would teach kids how to skate either we used to call them like ice penguins.
Yep.
So they can't stand up at all. Or, the ones that were like at a level 4. And I used to do figure skaters and hockey as well. And it was pretty funny because all the hockey players were like, I'm not a little Twinkie on the ice. Like, I don't need to put my hands up. And I'm like, you do for balance and then you can figure it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what were you getting paid when you were doing that?
15. I'm not going to say the year. You can figure it out.
Yeah.
It was $8.25.
That's amazing.
And I did that from grade 9 all the way to grade 12. And then from there, in the summertime, because skating used to slow down, I got my lifeguarding and it's called the NLS, and my swim instructor. So I used to go from the rink to the swimming pool all in one building, and it was just like all day long, like ch-ch-ch-ch-ch.
What a life lesson that would be, eh? Understanding that there's seasons sometimes to business. If you want to stay busy or stay financially wealthy, then you have to change and adapt.
Absolutely. And
at such a young age.
Oh yeah. And actually from there too, one other lesson I learned, people would actually come up to me after like the lessons were done, because it was like a group lesson, and they would say, how much do you charge on the side? And that was my first time I think I got into business, that I didn't even realize it, because I was like, oh, how much are people charging? And then I'd go around and like $30 an hour. And back then when I was making $8.25 going to $30, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. What can I do with all of this? Now looking back at $30, that's nothing. But it was an experience.
For sure. And so tell me a little bit more about, now that we've got that off our plate, so figure skating, lifeguarding, all around, just athlete, teaching our little penguins to go. Yep. What did you call the toddlers in the pool? Dolphins?
No, they were like penguins too, because they're just like, okay. I can't remember the name that we called them, but you know what? That's a good question. I can't remember. They had names for each level up until like level 1 to level 10. oh man, I can't remember the name. I just remember bronze, silver, medallion.
Okay,
Those were
yeah.
like after the fact. And then you had your NLS, but I can't remember. Oh my, what? That's gonna bother me now. I can't remember what we used to call them.
You can email me later.
Yeah.
So getting into this, so love hearing more. But so Schooley Mitchell, what's it like? How's it get started? Because it sounds fantastic in terms of. I remember when I was starting my business and then also getting more established. How are we allowed to do this without any like testing or concern? I don't know how to pay my taxes. I don't know how to do this. My mom actually got me into a program called at the time, it's changed names, but it was called Starter Company through the city of Hamilton. And I remember she had a newspaper cutout, and she's like, "You should look at this." And I just, to make her feel at ease, I went and did it.
Nice.
But it wasn't. It was good, but it wasn't It wasn't specific, or it wasn't. I mean, you still could fail.
Okay, so I'm going to bridge this into different pieces here. So I own a franchise.
Okay.
When you own a franchise, they give you the processes, systems, and people to help you succeed.
Okay.
In fact, I can't remember the exact number, but 80% of franchising will succeed because that proven process is in place.
Yes.
And in order for me to get into Schooley, I actually got connected with a franchise consultant.
Oh, wow.
So back in the day, I remember my parents looking at a Baskin Robbins when it was like the it thing, and Dairy Queen. So when you would go and approach, or when they did at the time, like a Baskin Robbins or a Dairy Queen, you would need to have number one, funding. And number two, you have to have the credibility behind you in a sense where, okay, here's this business plan. Here's why I want to do this. It's actually harder to go that way, to go that route, because there's so many people in line to apply. It's like applying for a Tim Hortons right now. Go apply for a Tim Hortons. See how far you get.
Yeah.
Right? So I went through a franchise consultant, and actually I was doing marketing for him at the time.
How did you find them?
I found him through WSI. So I was working for WSI,
Okay.
and I just wanted to do vending machines on the side. I said, you know what? I'm going to start with something small. I'm going to learn a little bit about, certain businesses, piece it together. Comes back to the seasonality. When something hits the fan, the other piece picks up, and there's always money coming in. I wanted to do vending machines. He goes, listen. He goes, you know your shit. He goes, I'm going to give you this quiz. And it had everything from home services to home office franchises to restaurants. There's 800 franchises.
Oh, wow.
In this group called FranServe.
Okay.
And
is that local or online for anybody listening?
It's both local and online.
Oh, cool.
So you can find a franchise consultant locally, or you can go online, go to FranServe, you'll find the quiz, and they'll match you up with somebody. Kind of like a real estate agent.
Yeah, very cool.
So I went in and he's like, listen, I have something better for you. Here's what we came up with. I think you would be great at this. Here's the investment. So the investment was actually less than to invest in the vending machines, because I wanted to not do one, I wanted to do 10 and put them around different places like an Amazon warehouse, the airport, all sorts of things. Because I have something better for you. I said, okay. So then we sat down and he goes, listen, he goes, because you went through a franchise consultant, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get in. Because you're not just somebody off of the street, you're a referral. And I said, okay, interesting. And then he said to me, he goes, all I need you to do is just be proactive. When they send you an email, you send it back right away and show that you really want it. And that's all I had to do. There was no test. I didn't need to necessarily have a degree. That definitely helped. Certain ones, they don't even do like a criminal check on you. Mine, they did, of course, because you're dealing with money. Some of them, they don't even ask for a criminal check. So if somebody wants to turn their life around, they've made some mistakes in the past. And if they don't require a criminal check, franchising.
cool.
But to the program that you were talking about, when I started my patent, I did a few programs. There's ones with Ryerson, Guelph. I even remember when I was doing marketing for some of these startups, they were going to some of these programs to get help and to figure out, okay, how do I do a business plan? How do I do an export plan? Like all of this stuff.
And there's funding in it. I mean, I remember, I think I got $5,000, and the time commitment, if I was just to keep plumbing, I probably would have made 20.
Yeah, see?
So it wasn't the financial. Yes, it was nice to get the $5,000 at the end of it, but it wasn't worth my time from an hourly basis. Like, it wasn't a big lump sum of money, but it was the learning.
Yes. And it's the connections. Mm-hmm. I signed up for the other day for this thing for MasterCard. I didn't even care about the $10,000. I was like, I just want the connections, because that $10,000, you can turn that into $100,000.
And so, talk about relationships and building them is obviously such a big part of business, especially when you get into more of a white collar businesses, and you're either bridging that gap as a white collar to blue collar, or just staying in. I don't like saying the corporate space, because you can be corporate as a plumbing company, but I think corporate has a bad name for it, but really it's just organized with processes.
Yeah, that's what it is. And just it is a corporation at the end of the day, limited liability.
Yeah. So tell us about Schooley. What do you guys do? How does it work?
Okay.
What is the franchise that you are a part of?
Okay, so how it works is I go into a business.
Yep.
And we have a conversation. What are your goals? What are your challenges? And where do you want to be, and why is it stopping you? And in that first initial 30 minutes, a therapy session comes out. I turn into like a business therapist.
Love that.
So initially what I do is I say, okay, first, can I help you or can I not help you? Because some people are, I don't want to say so far into like the damaged goods side, but they need other expertise and help first before I can come in. So I kind of try to understand like what the heck is going on. Then what we do is we perform what's called like a free comprehensive audit of your expenses. So I'll look at your phone on your desk, your internet. We look at waste management, especially in the contractors, trades, construction space. Waste is huge because they'll drop off a bin and say, hey, this is this price. And then next week it's another price. We do fuel, ELD. ELD is huge now because things are getting stolen left, right, and center when it comes to trucks, especially F-150s.
Yep.
I mentioned fuel as well. So fuel in the sense where you have trucks parked outside, but let's say, for example, and you brought in Tim Hortons today.
Yep.
Some people will go to a gas station and then they'll buy snacks. Those cars are monitored, what you can and cannot buy, where it's being bought, instead of them just saying, hey, here's what I bought at Shell today. Here's the receipt, Daniel. And then you put in your computer, you put it on Expensify, and it's done. We look at uniforms. That's a huge one. Some people want to be in complete uniform all the time, depending on the company. Mm-hmm. We look at your software. At the end of the day, I have 12 categories, 3,700 vendors across North America.
Wow.
So Bell and Rogers are not the only telecommunication companies. Believe me, there's a lot more. Waste management, it's not just Waste Connections. You'd be surprised how many little guys there are out there. And the bigger you go, the more marketing they're going to have to do, the more people they have to pay, the more that's coming out of your pocket sometimes. So even though the buying power could be a little bit different, sometimes the small guy will offer you a better deal, but the small guy sometimes just doesn't know how to get out there. So when they connect with us, we have those relationships built, and then we say, okay, what can you offer? What can you offer Daniel today? What can you offer this person today? And there's that way. Second way is sometimes if they're like, listen, I really like Bell. I have a company right now where they're up north. It's only Bell or Rogers because of how the towers work. So he goes, listen, I really cannot move companies. I will not have reception. I said, okay, no problem. I understand what it's like, especially when you go up to a cottage. We'll call Bell and say, hey, listen, stop with all these extra fees. Because it's not just like on the personal side when someone's like, oh, it's only $2. When it's a business, it becomes even more. We tell them, stop with the bullshit. Here's what other companies are offering. Here's what you're up against. And we tell them what to do. It's kind of like Walmart. So Walmart will tell P&G, okay, this Swiffer or this cleaning product, you're going to make it for this price. I don't care how you do it, you're going to do it, and you're going to do it like this. That's kind of how it works. You still get to keep the same quality and the same company or the vendor. We negotiate a lot of pricing. So then what we do is we come back, this is like 4 to 6 weeks later, and we say, here's what we found, here's what we did, or sometimes didn't find. Sometimes you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
And then from there, sometimes it's 20,000, sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's $1 million. You really don't know. It just depends on the type of the business and also who's in charge. I had a construction company. They had 4 phones. Why do you need 4 phones? Like, oh, 1 for each job site. I'm like, you don't need 1 for each job site. I'm going to tell you right now. You need 1 phone. You need 4 different lines or different extensions. Here's how we're going to do it. Done. And I said as a joke, I'm like, oh, is it because you have a girlfriend on the side or multiple? They're like, no. And I'm like, okay. And then I moved on. But the other piece that we find too, and I'm sure you've experienced this all the time, head office and the people on the road, sometimes there's this big disconnect. There's a lot of swearing that goes back and forth, but when it comes to some of the pieces on how to get certain things done, there's no communication. They didn't even know they had 4 phones for each employee. How crazy is that?
Yeah, when you talk about like bigger organizations, we find that, and you see it all the time, but talking about waste and organization and structures, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Even for the small guys, not even just the big guys, even the small guys.
Mm-hmm. And so I've been thinking about this for a while, just in terms of structuring. I'm sure it's got to be out there. I just haven't found it. But like when you talked about it earlier with when you do your consultation at first, when you meet them, mm-hmm. do they want to help? Do they want help? Because when you come from the help space, I find when you have a product that you know is going to help somebody and you're empathetic and you just care, you're just like, oh, I could help you. Do you find it hard as a business? Obviously, you profit from this, which is important, but also you're selling yourself as a service or your business as a service, and you just don't, you know you can help them, but you know that it's going to be more work for you than it is good in terms of like a good client versus bad client. How do you find yourself letting go and just being like, not for me, not right now?
That's a great question. I think when they start nitpicking at certain things, that's when I have to say no. But when it comes to, I would say, even finding people or getting that point to helping somebody, it does take time. It's not an overnight success. I can put money back into your pocket 6 weeks later, but not everyone's like, oh, so, like in the beginning, they're like, how does that work? I don't believe this is going to work. This is not true. So it took me a bit to like get a few, and then they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then they started telling everyone else, especially in the trades, they're always talking. Yeah. But it's almost like an accountant. There's a lot of accountants out there. They'll file your taxes for you. And let's say that costs $400. They know all the tips and tricks, but not everybody all the time wants to take that advice. So you kind of have to, it goes back to relationship building. And how I really get out there is things like these, like podcasts, speaking. I did one last week where I actually complained about something, and this guy gave me like 6, it's called mascarpone. It's like to make tiramisu. Okay. So he goes, what are you doing with all this? I said, I'm making tiramisu. He goes, oh, I love tiramisu. I got him a tiramisu. I made it for him. I put my card on, and he goes, okay, let's talk. It's different ways like that you have to build it, I would say.
100%. I think it's really cool. So as you're going into this business now, and you're coming from, a marketing and service background, and obviously, being creative and thoughtful. I'm going to say tiramisu, but I just did get back from Italy, but the only thing I brought back was chow. How do you manage your time when you're coming up with these ideas? You're making a big shift. What does your day look like?
I time block.
Okay.
And from a certain time to a certain time, that's all that I'm doing. If I get interrupted for something that's not relevant, they're in trouble. Or my business partner's in trouble, or whoever it is. I don't stop what I'm doing. If I stop and I do something else, I get distracted, it's a disaster. So I time block. I do things also consistently.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, prospecting, like 9 to 12, those are my prospecting hours. And then on Saturdays, those are my social Saturdays. That's when I do like a lot of my content or or things on social media. Every day has like a certain purpose. And then at a certain time, I have to stop. And I would also say, so I did burn out a couple of times.
Okay.
And I learned a couple lessons. Working out is actually very important. Taking walks are very important. Eating right is very important. That's honestly how I manage my time. And you can't interrupt me. I get I get annoyed or I'll just like, oh, here we go. But that's what I do is I time block. There's work and there's life, and they don't mix.
Cool.
And you gotta have them both separate, and you gotta make time for both.
It's interesting because so many entrepreneurs, including myself, mine is a flow through, from business to work to pleasure. I've found peace at, making time for yourself, so a morning gym kind of thing. But at the same time, it's tough when you're out and you're networking. And is this a business event or is this a friendship or? How did I meet? Oh, how did I meet this? Oh, yeah, we did a job together. Oh, but now we're friends. That's fantastic. So, looking back, obviously going through the marketing, starting out as a lifeguard and figure skating coach, or just skating coach for all the penguins. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say relax, and the process will happen. You're doing the time for the crime. It will happen. And another key piece, and I was talking about it with a friend yesterday. There's a book by Stephen Coley.
Okay.
One of his principles is you can only sharpen a saw so many times before it'll cut the wood the exact same way or effectively. So there's a time when you can learn, and there's a time where just go out there and do it. You don't need to keep sharpening it with the knife sharpener. It's only going to get so sharp. And then when you get to that piece, that saw, when you get the saw and you start cutting the wood, how you cut it the 7th time versus the 10th time is not going to make a difference. But from the 1st to the 7th is going to be different when you start cutting through that piece. But learn when to stop learning and just go.
Oh, such good advice. It is. There's so much to consume out there, which is fantastic. And it's finding, what am I going to consume? Why am I going to consume it? Where am I going to go?
And you know what? FAIL stands for first attempt at learning. You're going to fail. You're going to get rejected. Starbucks got rejected by, I think it was like 33 investors.
Wow.
Now look at him. The lady what's her name? The Harry Potter author.
Oh, yeah.
How many times did she get rejected by publishers? If you believe in what you're going to do, go do it. And that's the other piece. I would go to all of these like entrepreneur cohorts. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't learn this in this cohort and I got to go to this cohort now. Just go do it. You're going to fall on your face. Get back up and keep going. A toddler doesn't fall and then cry all the time. It's like, nope, up, let's go.
You're fine.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much for being on the show. For everybody thinking out there, all Erika's socials will be online. If you're thinking about making a good investment in your business by finding some efficiencies and savings, give Erika a call. And yeah, guys, can't believe episode 68. This has been amazing.
68.
68.
Wow.
Wild. We always ask ourselves these questions. Why not me? Why not now? And without Erika and her story, we don't have a show. So thank you so much for being on.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. That was great.